If I ask you to indicate, to decide about the medicine of 21st century, would it be genetics or would it be brain research?
I think it's brain research because I work on the brain. But I think also the technology has come together to really start asking questions about the brain that we were not able to ask before. And also for health reasons, people are getting older, and the older they get, the more they're at risk for all kinds of diseases. And I think what concerns a lot of people is that they start to get dementia, and we have now a lot of families that know somebody who has Alzheimer's disease or other dementias.
Is there any common point of genetics and brain research when you can cooperate in order to get more effective results?
Absolutely, yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, I'm not trying to say genetics is not important. In fact, genetics helped us to discover some of the first mutations that cause these diseases. And now we're learning that most diseases, part of it is the environment you live in and part of it is your genes. And what we're learning is that there are a lot of different genes that influence whether you get a disease such as Alzheimer's or not. And the geneticists are really helping us to understand that.
So what's the most important or most common reason of neurodegradation?
We don't really understand why we get neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, but maybe to some extent it is just an aging disease. Like when you get older, maybe your hip will break and you have to get a hip replacement. If you live old enough, your brain doesn't function as well and you might get a brain disease. But what exactly causes it, we don't know.
And what about the environment? I mean, the pressure, because depression is also the mental disease. So what about the environment, the people, the profession? Are there any specific professions which are the most exposed on mental disease?
Yes, that's a good point. So as I said before, the environment plays a big part in what kinds of diseases we get. And it's interesting, you ask about types of professions. We know, for example, that Parkinson's disease can be influenced by exposure to toxins. So, for example, farmers that use pesticides, they are at increased risk for developing Parkinson's disease. But for Alzheimer's disease, we don't really know that. We know that people who have longer years of school, who are very active, who know more than one language maybe, they have a reduced risk to develop these diseases. So staying active, also exercise is very good. So you can actually do something to try to reduce your risk.
So we can prevent ourselves from such a risk. Train our brain?
Prevent maybe unfortunately too much at this point, but we can reduce the risk. So living a healthy life, a varied diet, exercise, being engaged in conversations, I think that these are all things that seem to reduce the risk.
Medicine is not about money, expect it is, so that's the case of brain research. How do you get money on it? Because I've learned here that most of money comes from private sector, not the public sector, which should be more interested in.
Yeah. I think there is a shift that the governments in most countries recognize that this is an epidemic, that there's more and more people, because they live longer, that get these diseases, and it will be very expensive to care for them. So I think these governments realize that they have to do more research to try to reduce the risk for the disease and even treat it. And so I think there is a movement now that there will be more research, such as we had it for cancer or other diseases.